Welcome to Weird Games and Weirder People, a podcast about role-playing games and the weird, wonderful people behind them. Hello, wonderful weirdos. This is Diogo Nogueira, and today's guests are two budding game designers who are also writers and teachers. I'm talking about Zac Goins and Terry Azamber. But before we go to that, I would like to talk about a few announcements I have. I will be actually going to two cons this year. I will be on Game On Expo in Arizona from March 15 to 17, and I will be on GaryCon in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin from March 21 to 24. So if you're nearby and want to talk weird, come on over. And also remember to subscribe to our podcast, wherever you listen to your podcast, to receive updates when we release new episodes. Leave us a review and find out how you can support the show in the links in the show notes. But let's get back to talking about Megan and Terry. They wrote a solo journaling game inspired by weird stories, weird fiction, a little brother that just went missing, and you go on this journey, this windy journey to find him and find these supernatural weird creatures, and that have their own agendas and mysteries to solve. And the game was actually inspired by a game I wrote called Lost in the Deep, which is also a solo journaling game inspired by the story of Pines of Moria, but has its own twist and way you to play it. And we talked about many great things about how they discovered their interest in game design and writing a solo journaling game, how we talked about a little bit how they, experienced supernatural events and had these very weird experiences that informed the way they wrote the game. And the interest in the supernatural and the weird is very heavy on the show. So if you're interested into that, you're gonna enjoy this episode very much. And it was a great chat. They're really interesting people who have a very unique vision on how to play games, and seeing this from budding game designers is a very interesting way instead of just looking through the eyes of veterans. So I hope you really enjoy this episode, and let's get weird with Megan and Terry. Hello Megan, hello Terry, welcome to Weird Games and Weirder People. I'm happy to have you here, and how have you been?
Great, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to have both of you here to talk about your project and talk about both of yourselves as artists in this weird and wonderful world. And for the wonderful wielders out there that don't know who you are, and I also love to ask the guests here to who they are and what they do in their own words. So who is Zac Goins and Terra Arcis, and what it is that both of you are doing?
Well, I teach English at a community college during the day, and by night I kind of delve into a lot of fantasy stuff through a lot of different means. So one of those is through gameplay, but also through various writing exercises. And I don't know, that's probably who I am on a very basic level. I'm sure we'll get deeper.
I teach English at a high school locally. I've taught at community college before too. And I do a lot of writing as well. I've been working on novellas. I tend to like things that have a touch of the paranormal in them. So that's what I do. I also play D&D just like Megan does.
And we should probably clarify, I live in Kansas in the U.S. and Terry lives in Texas in the U.S. Yes. So we are a little ways apart.
Yes.
Nice. And how did you got together to work on a project, to work on a game, living so far? I know you have, probably hobbies in common. Did you know from previous times? How did you got together to work on this?
We actually went to college together. I was in a master's program and she was finishing up her BA before she got her master's program. And we were living in the same town. We were living in Pittsburgh, Kansas, going to Pittsburgh State University. And that's how we ended up meeting. She actually lived a short distance from me. We had college classes together. In fact, I think the first one was a fiction writing class that we had together with Karen Stoltz. And we met and we just became friends.
And for this particular project, Terry, when she moved down to Texas, I knew had a really hard time finding a new group to play D&D with. That was something she really loved, but it was hard to find a new group of people that she connected with. And so when I saw it was actually your single player game, Lost in the Deep, I was like, what? They make single player games? And I had no idea. So Terry was the first person I thought of, and I thought, well, she needs to know about this too. How could she not know about this? And she has, in the meantime, found a crew, but she was kind of the inspiration that got me excited about your game, and then that led us to developing our own. So that was why I thought of Terry with this.
Yes,
Oh,
because
nice.
I had missed it
Go
an
ahead.
awful lot, and it was whenever we found out about your game, I was thinking, man, this is exactly what would have been just so awesome for me because I've only been with my group for fairly a little less than a year, but it was so hard to find a group whenever I moved over here. So the concept of a single player group, particularly one that you could journal and put your own ideas and bring it into to reality was just so awesome for us.
Oh, nice. I'm happy you found, Lost in the Deep, which is my journaling game that I created inspired by the Ratchet and Ratchet and Alone, which is a system of journaling games, and inspired by, the story of Minds of Moria. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but have you ever, did, since then, did you explore other, solo games, other types of, you know, solo games instead of journaling games, or how has it been this solo? Because for me it was something new too. I mean, if
Mhm.
we study this history of solo role playing games, they kind of exist since the beginning. Like if you go
Mm-hmm.
to see like the first role playing game magazines, they had rules for playing D&D solo in the 70s, but this was kind of forgotten like in the 80s and 90s, I would say, and it was really kind of brought back during the pandemic, especially, right?
Mm-hmm.
So have you been rediscovering this too? Because for me it was something new, and I'm always rediscovering and learning new things. And now it seems like it's almost obligatory to release a game with a solo mode. So
Yeah.
how has you been exploring solo role playing?
I would say that actually it was a new concept for me, which is why I found it so exciting because I
Yeah,
was used to creative writing, of course, and fiction writing, but I wasn't used to the idea of actually creating a game or playing a game that way. So for me, it became really exciting because I had felt so isolated whenever I moved over to this area and had to leave behind my group.
I don't have a
yeah,
lot of experience with other single player role playing games. I know Modifius has a Fallout 3 single player game. My husband, it turns out he had written one. I was like, I didn't even know you wrote one. Like, that's not where I came out with it, which is hilarious. Um, no, I hadn't done a lot of others, but it really felt a lot like as an English teacher, a lot of the cards felt like prompts that I would give in my
yeah,
writing classes.
Right.
It was a really
yeah,
strong connection to something that I do on a regular basis inside the classroom, and it was just more fun. And
yeah,
I think both of us as writers really felt like there are ways where you can play D&D that was a lot more gritty and a lot more rules based and whatever, but we wanted something that was going to encapsulate that journaling and that writing and that detail and
yeah,
the story
Right.
and the all of that kind of part of it, just because that's who we are, and that's kind of a connection I knew we both shared, so we had that in
Yeah.
similar.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
something I was curious about. If you see any way you can relate this solo role playing game experiences with the if with writing, with your work as writers.
Yes.
If you uh, how do you relate this? Have you learned anything from writing that you use when you're doing solo RPGs, or anything that you've been learning through solo role playing games that you apply when you work on your writing, on your literature work?
I would actually say the two go together because one thing about being a writer is I remember. one of my first writing teachers was actually Steve Yarbrough, and he always said, I can teach you structure, but I can't teach you eye for detail. And one thing that I think for me was the visualizing in my mind what was happening in the game, just like I visualize in my mind what's happening whenever I'm writing a scene. So I think that that's where, we were able to bring it to life, but it's also the concept of where you're giving enough prompts that each person can have their own individual experience from this. And that was something I find really appealing, where if you're writing a book, it's basically going to be, whatever you've written down on the page, where this actually gives the person their own freedom toward going off on an experience that is completely their individual experience.
And I think, Terry, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the things that I felt really important, was really important as we got into this, was that this is not us telling a story.
Yes.
But that this was something that our players got to lead with. They're the ones who got to tell the story. They got to make decisions as far as that goes. I think we wanted to keep the role-playing elements really strong in there. So you get to make decisions, but there's also a lot of fate, because that's part of the whole fate thing, right? Is being put in these situations and having to make those decisions. But I think we also wanted something kind of for ourselves, a world that we would like to go and explore and dig into, writing prompts that would inspire us as we got through them, and a story that could be different no matter how many times we played it. I think those were all things, at least for me, that were really important as we got into this. So I think the aspect of having written this was kind of a tool for ourselves in a way, just so that we could go back and explore our own worlds that we'd created together.
I know one thing we both talked about is that what excites us is the idea that somebody could take their journaling experience and actually turn it into their own story. And we just love the idea that somebody would, you could have 3 people playing this same thing and come out with something completely different.
Yeah. And because one of always, I read about writing fiction. It's something that I want to try, but I'm always afraid, especially because I want to write in English to reach more people, and I'm not a native speaker or writer or anything like this. But it always says, like, when you're writing, the characters have the life of their own, and they start making decisions of their own in a way. And what I'm curious is sometimes, because in RPGs, sometimes you roll dice, and because of the prompts, this helps you make the decision. But when you're writing, it says that the characters make the decision. And my question would say, would you use tools like this, like solo role-playing games, to help you make this, help you or the character you're writing about make decisions in actually writing a book, or just for playing? Do you think that's can be useful for someone that is actually writing a novel, to make tools like a game for their own writing?
Sure. I don't see why not, because they have books that are actually writing prompts, and I don't see why they couldn't go off on it. Because, I mean, let's face it, if you're role playing with a group, it kind of happens that way too. I mean, because any DM, I've never been a DM, but my DM can tell you that we go off and do stuff he never planned us doing. So
it is the fun of it.
Exactly. I mean, he'll say, I was trying to get you guys to go this direction, and you went off that direction instead. And I wasn't really ready for you to go off in that. So I think in a way it's the same thing with playing, because writing is such an individual thing, that actually a game that is a single player really would appeal to somebody like that, because it's almost like the whole game would be their prompt.
Well, and I would say I am ADHD. I was undiagnosed for a long time, up until my adulthood, and just was diagnosed a couple years ago. But as someone who played a lot of D&D in groups, not being the DM, right, I would have to then wait for my whole turn to get around the table. And depending on how big our group was that night, I could be totally lost by the time it got back to my turn, and I'd feel like I missed it. Whereas when we have a smaller group, or even the single player, I don't have to worry about that because I'm always the one in control of it. And if
Right.
I need to take a break, one of the reasons I stopped playing with our group locally was because I had two small kids and they needed somebody to help get the
Yeah.
snacks and put them to
Right.
bed and whatever. And it just became really hard for me to be involved in
Yeah.
that. And so this is something where it's just me. Nobody is waiting on me to take my turn.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, they're not like going to roll my dice for
That's
me and
true.
hurry me up.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I can put a pause on it and I can come back whenever I need to. And so that was something that I really liked. But yeah, I think when characters are kind of running away from you on the page, part of the way we do that is because they're in depth, they're 3D. They have positive traits, they have negative traits, they have somebody who is complicating their lives, right? Their antagonist that's really coming at them for good or ill intent, right? But they just happen to be in the way. And so when we are talking about a game like this, we wanted to incorporate many of those same elements. So we still have the emotional element. In this particular game, in Terra Arcis, we are trying to find the little brother that ran away, right? So you
Yes.
have some parental concern because you're his guardian and all of that. But we also have relationships. This is a huge thing with the Fae. Who's in charge of what? Who has control over what? And so we wanted to make sure that relationships were still a big deal so that you got some role playing. Are you going to benefit this person and at what cost? And are you going to take somebody else off and at what cost? And weighing the present issue versus the future issue, right? All of that kind of thing. But there's also other classic needs. So we have a timetable because time is always pressing. So we've just built in a lot of real life elements that characters in a book would have to deal with, right? They have their work, they have their family, they have all of those things they have to deal with as well. And so by building this in layers, I feel like we accomplished a lot of what make our characters run off the page as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and it's even as you said, you work as English teacher. That's maybe something you could incorporate even in education. You do like creating things to help students beginning writing. I think because
Yes.
at least for me, to start something and doesn't know like structure and writing a game like this, at least give you some structure to how you
Mhm.
begin writing, and then you take off on your own, right? And
One of the things I tell my class is in order to have a story, you have to have a person and a place with a problem.
oh yeah.
And so I think for most of the cards in the deck, I think there's a few boon cards where you get a benefit or you get a token. But for most of it, like you have a problem that you're facing. And so
Yeah,
you have to
something to deal
make
with.
those decisions. Yeah. So
What kind of book are you
That's
thinking of
awesome.
writing? Diego, what kind of
Oh,
book?
me?
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, I I love weird pulp fiction,
Hmm.
like those old weird tales stories that mix fantasy, sci-fi, and horror. And I would love to to have a fictional magazine, but for my Stone and Sorcery game, so sword
Hmm.
and sorcery in a mythical prehistoric planet.
Hmm.
So I would like to have like a primal tales with literature, comics, maybe some music inspired by this. So yeah, I don't know.
It's pretty
I
neat.
like to write. Yeah.
Well, I've talked more than a few people into writing because it's one of the cheapest hobbies you can do. You know, everybody's
Oh
got
yeah.
Google or some sort of writing platform, usually on their phone or on their device or just a sheet of paper, and you can get started. It's not expensive. And if it's garbage, you delete it and nobody knows you even started it. So the risk is very, very low.
Yeah. I don't know. I want to write about life too and stuff that happens. So, but it takes times, and I want to make so many RPGs too. That's like,
Oh, sure.
what do I focus now? It's hard, and and because I write and I do RPGs, I'm thinking, oh, I have to have another hobby that doesn't relate to this. So I'm trying to learn ukulele, but it is
Oh,
hard.
yeah.
Yeah. And I write jokes too. So I joke that I work as a tax collector, and I used to say that my dream was to be an RPG writer. And now that I am an RPG writer, I say that now my dream is to be a stand-up comedian. So like I do courses about comedy and stuff, and I write jokes and sketches and stuff like this. but I haven't, been brave enough to perform for anyone yet. So
Yeah.
It's
yeah,
pretty neat, though. You
yeah.
know,
This podcast is inspired by a podcast by a comic called Pete Holmes. He has a
Okay.
podcast called "You Made It Weird," when he invites other artists, to talk in general, and he also long format conversations, and it's pretty neat.
I like
Yeah.
that.
neat.
Yeah, I like that. I also have a secret list. This is one of the ways that I'm weird. I have a secret list on my Google Drive called I'm Funny. And I also put any weird, usually it's very dark humor, but little funny things that I think of during the day that crack myself up. And so I just keep like a running list. So
Yeah.
yeah, I pull that out every once in a while.
That's awesome. I mean, that's was something I was gonna ask you to, since the podcast is called Weird Games and Weirder People. I was gonna ask if you could you share any weird thing from you, weird habit or weird trait that maybe a friend or a loved one said, yeah, no, you do this thing. It's a little bit weird. Can you share just some weirdness from yourself with our wonderful weirdos that listen to the podcast?
Do you want to go first, Megan?
Oh, listen, I'm very weird, so I'm
We
perfectly
all
happy to
are.
go first. um, one of the things that I like is I love language. I'm not great with language, but part of the thing that drew me into the English department was I love Old English. And so that was something that I learned to translate to a moderate degree when I was in college. And so I thought that was awesome. And then I met my husband who's nerdy in the appropriate ways, like socially, right? So he likes all the
Mm.
Marvel stuff and he likes, Lord of the Rings and like all the stuff that's like culturally acceptable. And here I am, still the weird one out with my Old English fantasy and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I guess that's one of the ways that I'm a little bit weird.
They
Oh,
even had a Star Wars Death Star
Oh yeah,
cake at their wedding.
we did.
nice.
Yeah, we definitely
Yeah.
did. I surprised my husband with a bunch of hand pressed Star Wars chocolates at our wedding,
Wow.
and we had a Star Wars tree, a black tree with white lights for Christmas for a long time with the Death Star as our star. Yeah, it was very fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love Star Wars too, but yeah.
It was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never seen anybody else do that at their wedding, but that was awesome.
Yeah.
Um, I would have to say, I probably go in a different direction because the family I come from has a lot of stories that are kind of odd and that's been handed down, and a lot of beliefs that are odd. And I'm sorry, it's my basset hound who's having a little fit here, and that's a little wagging tail in the background too.
Yeah.
Um, I know that one of the reasons why in the game I put Kushi in, which is the black dog that predicts death, is because in my dad's family, people have seen the black dog before somebody died. In fact,
Wow.
I saw a black dog before the day before my dad died. So
Mhm.
no, so my
Wow.
interest in the paranormal comes from probably just having a family where the odd is kind of accepted.
Do you mind me asking about this a little bit about the black dog the
No, I don't
that you
mind you
see?
asking. I was
Do
actually,
does
I was actually,
everybody see the same dog, or is the dog
I,
changes over time?
I have no idea what the others saw. I know it was a black dog, and I didn't even know about it until later on. So I didn't have a chance to really ask about it because if I'd known, I would have been asking. But my dad told me about
Uh,
his cousin who always saw a black dog before somebody died. And then that literally the day before my dad died, he died like 5 o'clock in the morning. And the day before he died, I was driving home, and all of a sudden, this black dog appeared in the road right in front of me just before I got to my house. So it was, I kind of later on thought it was odd because it wasn't, I was familiar with the animals in the neighborhood and I hadn't seen it before and I never saw it again. So I just kind of thought it was strange.
did it look like a stray dog, or did it look like
You
taken
know,
care of? What kind of
it,
dog was it?
It was black. It wasn't like a normal lab, and it wasn't like a normal Rottweiler. It was. It wasn't
Well, it
like.
was big then. Was
Yeah,
big
it
then,
was a
like
big
lab.
dog. It
Okay.
was definitely a big
Yeah.
dog, and I remember it turned and it looked at me, which I thought was kind of odd too. Um, and then it just seemed to like go away. So, of course, I'm
Wow.
driving. I'm, seeing this dog right in front of me, and then it just seemed to be gone. I took walks around the neighborhood a lot, so I was familiar with the animals in our neighborhood, but I never saw it again.
Wow. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's weird. And now talking a little bit about this weirdness, I always ask everybody that comes here, could you define what is weird for you, and how do you seek it in the work that you do, either as a writer and now as game designers? And if you can talk a little bit how you seek the weird, and because the weird for here in the podcast is kind of a good connotation, like the weird, the wonderful weird. It can be unsettling, but it's also kind of fascinating in a way. So could you
Mhm.
define what is weird for you, and how do you seek in your own life, in your work?
One thing I would say that we did with this project was whenever we decided what direction we were going to go, um, I decided we weren't going to do just the traditional stuff that
Mhm.
everybody knows. And so I went and did research and ended up pulling in some fae where there was like, I didn't invent them. They actually were traditional stories about particular types of fae that probably a whole lot of people hadn't never, heard before. But I thought that was something I was intrigued by the different stories that I hadn't even heard of, but they were traditional stories. So I liked learning the research that was behind it, really appealed to me about learning about new types of fae that I wasn't, because everybody's heard of, we have leprechauns and, we've had brownies and stuff like that. But I wanted to kind of stretch us into stuff that perhaps not everybody had ever heard of and bring in also, a little more of the culture in the background by doing that.
Mhm. And I
And
love
but
that. I've gone on some pretty deep dives into that. I would say probably one of the ways that I uh, dive into the weird on a kind of semi-regular basis, um, and combining that with my teaching is through teaching, you get students who have been through everything, right?
Mhm.
They are really not just blank slates that are ready to learn something, but they're students who have a past.
Right,
They have previous life experiences. Maybe they have stuff at home that's falling apart, or of course, you get the jokes, right? Oh, sorry, my grandparents died, right? I've killed off six
right.
grandparents this year trying to get out of classes, right?
Yeah.
You get those jokes.
yeah,
And so one of the things that maybe I'm a little bit weird in is I've gone through several life coaching classes to help my students, right? To say, okay, well, this is where you're at now, but how do we get to that place where you want to get, which is ideally graduation. But along that journey, I have discovered a great love for death lore and grief counseling, and just how we honor our dead and how we remember them, and how that demonstrates different cultures' perspectives, time-wise and locally, of what makes a hero. What is a noble thing that people are remembered for?
Mm.
What do people recognize as being valuable in those lives? And so I think that's um, kind of a weird thing to really appreciate the death lore and to go into that kind of that morbid place. I would say if I was going to define weird, I would say it's something that people aren't culturally comfortable with discussing,
Yeah.
right? And I think sometimes it's because we're afraid of it with death, that kind of thing.
Right.
Um, but there's so much beauty in that, to be able to say, well, yeah, but if I'm thinking about that part of my life, I'm going to make every day matter more. I'm going to make
Right.
the way that I live my life and what's going to be remembered about me important. I'm going to make that an important focus of my life. So uh, that's how I would define weird in my life, and kind of some of the ways that that's affected me.
I would have to agree with her because one thing I found that I deal in my particular job, I deal with a lot of very varied cultures, And I have always encouraged my students to talk about the varied cultures they are, and because they know that where I came from had a lot of diversity, that they are more open to then telling me stories that sometimes are really
Hmm.
unusual and fascinating, about things that happen in the cultures that they come from, which really intrigues me because, there's more in the world than we see. And
Yeah.
sometimes, I just keep on learning things, and I'm fascinated by that concept.
Hmm.
Yeah. Do you remember? Yeah, if you can share, like, no need for names or anything, but something weird and strange and even fascinating and wonderful that you learned from this experience with your students that you could share with us.
I can. I have a lot of Hispanic students who have come from over in Mexico. Mexico has a very vivid culture on different types of magic that they actually practice. And one was telling me, that about an aunt of his who would take out sicknesses from people, and she actually, they call him a curandera, I think it is. I'm not very good at
Yeah,
pronunciations, but
curandeira. Yeah.
yes, thank you. And she actually took an egg, that she ran over this person who was sick, and she opened it up, and this egg was literally filled with like cobwebs and spiders.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't question the kid wasn't making it up because he had no reason to make it up. And he was
Hmm.
telling me he had seen it, when she opened it up because he was there whenever she was performing this. But I
Yeah.
found that if you're open to listening, then people will tell you stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah. And what about you, Meg? Have you heard any of those experiences?
Not that kind of story, occasionally,
Yeah.
occasionally you see a student who has been through something kind of traumatic or that kind of thing. So I have a lot of stories of trauma from my students. Um,
Mm.
I have students
Yeah, it
with
must not
various
be easy.
medical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have students with various medical conditions. So multiple personalities was the last one, and they tell me this stuff, and I'm like, okay, just let me know, right, who you are today. And so we would get reintroduced every day, and we would just keep going about class and be like, all right, make sure
Wow.
so and so has the notes, and I don't bat an eyelash. I think like, we just kind of keep going. I think it's
Yeah.
kind of uh I don't know, kind of like Terry said, maybe a little bit reassuring for students who are
Mhm.
a little concerned about how they're going to be seen.
Right.
And I would say probably making sure that when we wrote, we also wanted to make sure that this game was something that people could play. Um, I guess, I guess as far as like, no matter where they're at, as far as ability
Right.
to like ableness, right? So making sure that all of those different levels. So we talked about a couple disabilities, but like making sure that they're still able to play this game.
Oh, very
Um,
nice.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think that was important as well.
What kind of resources or adaptations were you able to make to make the game more accessible, as you're saying?
I think there are a couple things we can do with layout as far as there are certain fonts that are easier for people who have dyslexia to be able to read because it differentiates the shapes a little bit more. With the playing cards, it's fairly friendly as far as because they are identified by shape and number and not just by like color or what have you for that kind of thing. But also as far as like economically, it's a zine. It's not a big book. It's something that
Yeah.
you can play over and over again. So economically, if you're at a disadvantage, this isn't a big thing because it's something. Um, very reusable, but also it's not a high price point, right? We want to keep
Yeah.
that so that it's accessible for anybody. And having things like online card decks or online dice rollers, so you don't have to have all the extra accoutrement.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's helpful as well. So,
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about the project, but we haven't really tackled it up front. But so tell us a little bit what it is, its name, what's the theme, what are you are trying to do with the game.
mhm. Well, the game is called Terra Arcis. And so the idea behind the game is that you have yourself, you are tracking down your little brother who has run away from you, the way that sometimes small children are wont to do. And you have been sucked through a fairy ring into the castle under the hill. And your job is to find your little brother and get out before 3 days have passed. But time works differently under the hill. And so the various cards that you draw will have you move time forward or move time back, as well as grant you boons and various relationships that help you along the way.
Very nice. And you do this by writing from the prompts and everything. Have you given this to other people to play? Have ever anyone shared any of the gameplay with you, or
Right
can
now
can
we have
anyone see any of the gameplay, like the journal anywhere?
there's a couple people who have copies with it. We've been doing the layout. We are having to rework a few rules of it because what we found is we were a little long-winded in our writing. Imagine that, two writers, maybe
Yeah.
having too many words there. So we're having to rework a few of the rules right now. So gameplay itself was fun, but we had so many options for everything. For example, Terry had an instance where you came upon a bridge with some trolls, and every number on the dice meant a different option, right? And so, so if it's a 1, you get thrown there, and if it's a 2, you get thrown here, and if it's a 3, this is how they hurt you, and if it's a 4, you end up in the water and you can't swim. Like there's various prompts there, and we're having to go back through right now and cut some of that out for layout. So the gameplay that we've had up until this point, we're having to rework a little bit, I think, to kind of narrow that down and make it more feasible for a zine. But eventually, maybe long form, I would like to put those tables back in if we could work that out long form and get the full range of it. So
maybe it can be an extra, like an addendum, or
Yeah.
Is the campaign running already, or is still like the follow on Kickstarter right
Our
now?
Kickstarter is set to launch right now on February 12th. So
Okay.
it is open right now to follow, and I don't know exactly when this is going to come out publication wise, but it will be open, February 12th, and it'll run for about 2 weeks to the end of the month.
Okay.
And so, I'm
the links will be on the show notes. So any wonderful weirdo out there that wants to support the game, check out the show notes. We have links there. So yeah.
I think what Terry said about wanting to make sure that we had a wide variety of old fae is really important. So, of course, we've got our leprechauns and our trolls and our whatever, but some of the Ferdig and
Where
some
did
of
you
the
draw
others.
inspiration from? You mentioned, research. Was there any particular book or author or, region, maybe the folklore or the myths from this place that inspired you most for Terra Arcis, or?
Terry had a particular reference book that she liked.
I had a book that's called The Witch's Guide to Fairy Folk, and that I used an awful lot. And when it goes through an awful lot of fae from different areas, but I pulled mostly from Celtic countries was what I was really focused in on. I wanted them to be Irish, Scottish, or Welsh was what my emphasis was on.
Most of my family history is Irish or Scotch-Irish. Almost my entire family history is from those places. And so I had, in high school, decided I was going to move to Ireland. And I was studying the language, and I was studying all the history, and I was studying all the lore, and I was learning all all the war songs, right? Like
Hmm.
the whole thing, I had just really immersed myself. And so a lot of what I pulled was stuff that I have gleaned over, 24 years, just
Oh yeah.
absorbing as much as I can from the culture and from everything I could get my hands on. So, um, yeah, I think we had kind of a mixed bag, but that was also sort of why we did this together.
Yes.
Yeah, nice. And is your family superstitious with this stuff? Do you actually believe in those myths because of your heritage? How is do you hear stories like old relatives about this or?
My family is very Christian. And so they have kind of they don't like to talk about any of that kind of stuff, right? That's all kind of taboo, right? That's part of what makes it, I guess, sort of weird for me, is because it's not spoken about socially where I'm from. But
But
I
where
think,
did you learn it then from?
oh, everywhere. I just, the internet is a fabulous tool.
Mhm.
But also lots of books. I have lots of books on the Celtic mythology, a wide variety
Oh
of
yeah.
them, um, and that kind of thing. Uh, so I think, like I said, it's been so many years and so many books and so many whatever. People
Yeah.
people know now, and they just kind of hand me stuff, and they're like, "Oh, you'd be into this," and so I'm a reader.
Yeah.
I peruse a lot of
But
stuff.
yeah, but have you ever, when you were younger, have you ever asked about this side of your heritage in a way, and your family was like, no, we don't deal with this stuff, or how
Yeah.
is it?
I think this is not making my family look great, but I had,
Oh,
in the not too distant past, some great grandparents that I think were alcoholics. And so my family really kind of focused on the current family and not the past family. So a lot of that was shut down. I will say that I know I have family connections in Antrim and Dublin. Particularly, I have some direct connection to family in those areas in Ireland, and I would love to get up there, particularly to Antrim. It's just gorgeous country, and I'd love to get up there and go see it, but that hasn't happened yet. I will
oh,
also say historically, that one of the things that happened when Christianity came through is they worked very hard to stamp out any kind of Celtic religion, any Druidic practices, anything like that. And so most of the
oh
religion
yeah.
that way has been lost. And
Mm-hmm.
so there are people who think that oh, well, we're Druids, we're going to tell you whatever, and that kind of thing. And it's a resurgence of a religion, but it's not
Yeah.
necessarily the religion that
Right.
existed before, because most of that's gone. And
Oh yeah.
so there's just not that history anymore.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
Uh, do you do any of you have any creative rituals for when you sit down to write, whether fiction or literature or game design? Like, do you put some music? Do you put some funny hats? Do you pour yourself a coffee? Put on your shoes? Do you have anything like this to help you get into the mood of your work?
I think it kind of, honestly, it sort of depends on where I'm at. Um, a lot of this, I kind of I literally had a laptop and wrote in bed. Um, but sometimes I have a box of rocks I'm really fond of that's on my desk that I like to play with. And I have certain rocks that I like to play with just before I start. If I'm sitting down at my regular desktop, I have this box of rocks that I like to play with my rocks and, then just have it coming out.
What kind of hawks are they?
Oh, the
Did
one I
you?
really like is actually a citrine. I really like my citrines. I think citrines, for some reason, I think help you with creativity. But I also like, turquoise, but it seems like the citrine is the one that I'm like, whenever I'm sitting down to write, I'm playing with the citrine, and it seems, for some reason, I think in my head anyway, it helps me. But the truth is, when I sat down with the laptop, the citrines were all over at my desktop. So it's just a quirky thing I do whenever I'm at my
Yeah,
desktop that I didn't do when I was at my laptop.
nice.
I write in the bathtub. It for a long time with little kids was the only place that I could get some peace and quiet, and they could bang on the door, but they couldn't come interrupt me. There was a place, a time during COVID where I told my husband, I was like, hey, listen, you have got to keep the kids out. I have got to be able to write and get my work done. And he's like, okay, got it. 5 minutes, 5 minutes. He was the one in there bugging me. And I said, go away. I told you I'm writing. And then 5 minutes later, my daughter, and 5 minutes later after that, my son, and then 5 more minutes later, and my husband again. And I was like, no more, I'm done. So I found out that I can lock the bathroom door and nobody can come in and bother me.
Yeah.
And so I will write on my cell phone, on a Word doc or a Google Doc on my cell phone. And that is when I get the best writing time. Yeah.
I too have been on guard duty on bathroom doors for my wife, so
yep,
I know how it is. Yeah,
they're big now. They're not a problem now. It's just a habit that I haven't lost. So,
but my kid does the same thing with me. Like if my wife isn't here and we're both of us, and yeah, he's on the door of the bed. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
Nice.
I do like to sometimes listen to music that fits the mood of whatever I'm writing. So I can't have other words. Those words and my words, I just can't do at the same time. But I listen to a lot of video game music. The soundtracks on video games are great. Or I like to listen to like rock cello.
Nice.
I like to listen to a lot of
There's a band that I love that mixes surf guitar with video game music, like Atari music. It's
awesome.
So good.
That sounds so cool.
Yeah, I'll send you a link. It's very nice
absolutely.
To write. Yeah. But they only have just one disc like this. The other disc they sing. And
okay.
But they sing in Portuguese. Maybe it won't make any sense to you, so maybe it will work.
I don't know, maybe I might be like, that's close enough to Spanish. I might be able to pick out somewhere, like a little
that's
bit.
True.
But no.
They mean totally different things. Like the words Spanish is hard for me because they look so much like Portuguese, but they mean completely different things a lot of the time. So that's why I like English. It's so different that it means something different. So it's safe.
Yeah.
Talking about inspirations, you asked about the stuff that inspired you for this work. But I also love asking creators if they have been inspired, or if they learned or they model, some other artist or creator when they do their work. As I talked to you, like for this podcast, I'm modeling a podcast by a comedian called Pete Holmes, and even in my own work in game designing, I am inspired by other artists, and I say that my creative crush is a comedian called Bo Burnham, and the way he does comedy inspires me to do RPG design work in a different way too. So what I'm like to ask you though, if there is any other creator, artist, writer from any kind of media or art form that maybe inspires you, or maybe you learned something from that you would like to share with us weirdos out here.
One thing about this project that I think was important to me was I am a big fan of Terry Pratchett. And one of my very favorite Terry Pratchett books is Lords and Ladies, where he talks about the elves. And he talks about the elves as everybody thinks that fairies are wonderful people. And they're like, these wonderful, blessed, cute, adorable creatures. And they're actually evil. Mm-hmm. And that was important to me whenever we were doing this project, to actually bring that aspect out. So whenever, sometimes I think that the parts that I wrote are maybe darker than the parts that Megan wrote, because I was actually looking into making sure that lore came back out again.
I think both of us prefer our Fae to be scary.
Yes.
there's, you know, I think it's kind of a modern invention along the lines of Disney that's like, oh,
Oh
let's
yeah.
make
Right,
everything
Oh yeah.
palatable and like shiny and
right,
nice and
right,
sparkly vampires and whatever, right? Like I
right,
just like
right.
I don't think that's really my thing. I'm not
Fairy
some
tales are very deadly. Like the
Yeah,
original tales, if you like look
yes.
at the old tomes, it's
yeah.
Yes.
bloody stuff. Yeah.
No,
And
it's
I
true.
think for me, that was really important to keep that alive as well. One of the
Mm.
authors that inspires me is Juliette Marillier, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. But she wrote Daughter of the Forest, and she wrote a whole series throughout that line. And they are novel length retellings of some Celtic fairy tales. And I really appreciated just she has such gorgeous prose. The descriptions that she give, it's very ethereal. It's very old world and just absolutely lovely. And so they're slow books, but they are really beautiful, and I very much appreciate that. And there's so much there is a layer of darkness, but it's not gore. It's a layer of sadness. It's a layer of layered emotions and recognition that things will never go back to how they were, and that everything has changed, and kind of the loss for what used to be, and you know the innocence and the loss of innocence and all of those kinds of things. And I think for me, that's probably the feeling that I wanted to portray throughout this. So I think that's probably the angle that I took on that. So Terry definitely brought some dark fae. I had a few dark fae.
Mhm.
I had a few dark fae for sure in there. I think the other thing is we didn't want you to have to lose this game.
Right.
I think at this point, we're probably about 50-50, right? Half of the
Yeah,
time you're going to win, half the time you're going to lose. And there are various ways to win or lose, right?
right.
Oh
And
yeah.
so you could completely win by finding your brother and both of you making it home. You could win in part because you know your brother's home, and
Right.
you're going to be trapped forever as a plaything of the Fae, but your brother at least will be home.
Yeah.
And so there's a partial win there, or there's losing, right? You could be sent home, but your brother's still there, or maybe you're both stuck as playthings of the Fae forever. You know, like uh, I think uh, I think there's all those options are available, and I think
Yeah.
that was important too, not to have a clean win at the end of
Right.
it.
I think that, hope is an important thing, but that's what actually makes role playing fun is you're not always sure how things are going to turn out.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we see in D&D all the time. You
Yeah.
don't know how, an
Eh,
encounter is going to necessarily turn out.
Hmm.
yeah, and failure can be equally as interesting, right?
Yes. Oh,
Especially
definitely.
if it's you making a decision. That's something
Right.
a difference from literature, comics, or other media that you're basically consuming. So like the emotions we feel are more related to empathy. Like you feel sad because the character feels sad, and but in games, in role playing games especially, uh, you feel the emotions because you are responsible for the actions of your character. Like it's
Hmm.
agency. So you will feel proud or you feel shame because you did those actions. You are responsible
Yes.
for them. Yeah,
I think
and
that was
that's
something that was a challenge to build into the game, because so much of our initial set of rules was just you roll a dice, you get the result of the dice, and it was very much like fate based, and there wasn't a lot
Yeah.
of player action. And so
yeah,
I particularly, and I know Terry agreed with this, but really wanted to be able to have that agency, to be
Right.
able to have that
hmm
buy-in, and to make
Right.
those
yeah,
decisions, and to be like, oh, I really messed up. I should
Right.
not have
yeah.
done that.
Right.
And I think that was important for us, and that's why we ended up with
Very
some of the
nice. Yeah.
relationship cards and some of those options as
Right.
well. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is even something, after I made The Lost in the Deep, I'm planning on doing another journaling game.
Hmm.
But it will be a little more complex because of this. Like I want not only to, there is an event and you resolve the event, but you have to options on how do you tackle this. So it would be a game that would have attributes, so you
Hmm.
could choose how to do this, and inspired by stoicism and things like this. So yeah. Hello, weirdos. This is Diogo Nogueira, and I'm back with a word from our sponsors. Me. I just released a new game called Cosmosaurus, in which you play a dinosaur space ranger who protects the galaxy from evil threats such as slime bankers, undead pirates, and cosmosaurs from a void dimension. It's a game with a runes-light system inspired by Forged in the Dark and Lasers and Feelings. It comes with a bunch of tables for you to generate content for it. If you know my games, they're really easy to play and they have tools to help you improvise and play with low prep. It's an ideal game for one-shots, short campaigns, and introducing new people to the hobby, and it's a really perfect family game. I play with my kids all the time. It's a game inspired by Saturday morning cartoons. It's really well illustrated by Lucas Kowalski from Poland, and with a great layout by Guilherme Gontijo. It's a really fun game. You should check it out on DriveThruRPG, itch.io, or exclusively in print on exaltedfurniture.com. I have many other games there, check them out. All the links are in the show notes, so click there. And let's get back to Weird with our chat. You mentioned Terry Pratchett, which I love too, and it's one of great inspirations. But you're also mentioning, fairy tales and stuff that you like is always related, to the past. Would you say your tastes are tailored to the nostalgic? Do you feel nostalgic for some, ages past, or because always you're tackling these themes a lot, and I was wondering, do you have any particular taste for a past epoch or anything like this?
I do have a nostalgia for the past, but I think it's for a past that never existed, right? Like,
oh yeah,
I love history.
I think that's nostalgia because
yeah,
it's never how we imagine it is. Never,
right?
Yeah, I think the past is in a lot of ways just a series of car wrecks and tragedies that have stacked up on each other. And so to identify them as being some...
To be fair, so is the present too.
Oh, for sure. That's my favorite reading material is doom scrolling before I go to bed. I think there's a lot of that. And I think there's a lot of hope and a lot of ingenuity, and there's a lot of people reaching out and building each other up. Absolutely. That's that hope that Terry was talking about, right? That keeps us together and keeps us hanging on. But yeah, I think maybe because of the family history and trying to find that family history of everything, like looking back towards the past and trying to see just like what happened there, how did all of this history get lost, why did my family come here and immigrate in the first place, all of those kinds of things. One of the first
helps
things
you navigate the future too, like when you understand your past.
Right.
And where you come from and what that means about who you are, and if it means anything about who you are, surely my grandparents with alcoholic parents, they weren't to blame for their, for the alcoholism in their family, so where's the line too, as far as how much the past should affect us today and how much is that us starting a new chapter and beginning again in the future. But yeah,
it's self-discovery too, in a way, right?
Yes.
Understand us a little bit better.
That's one of my favorite things about writing.
I would have to say, actually, for me, that probably an awful lot of how I view things has to do with the kind of people I come from. I mean, my dad's family is French Catholic. My mom's family is a bunch of Baptists from the Arkansas Ozarks. So they're people that are kind of predisposed to believe in the unusual to begin with. But I do think that it's actually because of that it's led, me to be a person who's a lot more open to studying things, or at least seeing, not necessarily believing everything, but at least being intrigued by it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, curiosity. It's very important,
yes,
and
exactly.
And I think it's mandatory for artists, right? We are always seeking new ways to see things or do things,
right?
And do you have any of you have any other hobbies, besides writing or now making games, which is kind of writing too, ways? Do you have other hobbies, something that you do just for yourselves?
I like to paint D&D miniatures a lot. I find that really satisfying to paint the D&D miniatures. I love watching them come into where the color comes out, and working on all the little details. And, it takes forever to get even the smallest thing done. I figure I spend about 10 hours on each little one. But I
It's
really actually
exercise
enjoy
of
it.
patience. Yeah,
Oh, yes. So I find it very relaxing.
nice.
I do a lot of crafts. I do a lot of outside stuff. So in the summer when the weather's decent, I'm usually outside doing something. Hikes,
Outside.
gardening.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I like all of that kind of stuff. And that's helped me in some of my writing too. Pulling
Oh
stuff
yeah,
out
for
of,
sure.
yeah,
Hmm.
out of
Yeah,
those
I love.
experiences. So,
Yeah, I love going to the forest, and trying to
mhm.
getting
Yeah.
that feeling of a primal place to use in primal quests or go to
Oh, yeah.
ruins and historical places. It's
Yeah.
it's it's great. Yeah.
My son has just discovered how fabulous forests are and is like, I just want to sit in a forest. I'm like, oh, son, finally, like we've connected. Uh,
Yeah.
so we're going to have to do some of that here in the spring. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's true, like, but we heard here that in Japan, doctors do prescribe people, what they call a treatment called forest baths.
Uh
So
huh.
you have
Yeah.
to immerse yourself in forests, for mental health and stuff, right?
There are actually studies that show this is my life coaching stuff, right? But there are actually studies that show even just having fake plants inside or like computer backgrounds of plants will boost the chemicals in your brain that encourage happiness.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We started, after the pandemic, we started taking care of plants here, and yeah,
Hmm.
maybe it's I
Yeah.
don't know. It's so much changed and got so much better that we can't identify what it's making. Like, if it's everything, if it's just one thing, but we keep doing everything to
Hmm.
keep it going well, I guess. Uh, Meg and Terry are, getting in now in the middle part of the podcast. I started doing more questions about personal life and experiences, and it is all about the weird and asking if maybe you might have weird experiences. So if you don't feel comfortable with any of the questions, you can skip and ask anything else. But have you any of you ever had any of out of body experiences or any kind of weird thing that happens of your perception of yourself changing?
I had actually studied that when I was younger, uh, doing out of body experiences. And I had studied a lot of meditation whenever I was younger. You know, that's an
Do
interesting
do
thing.
you still do meditation today or no?
I still do meditation because it helps me relax and go to sleep. So I do that. Um,
Do you
a lot-
meditation every day or just when you need?
Usually every night because it helps me relax. It helps me relax my
Yeah.
body so that I can go to sleep because Megan's ADHD, but I actually have a touch of ADD. So my brain is going like 20 miles an hour, and I just need to find
Mm-hmm.
to be able to calm down so I actually can focus enough to go to sleep.
Yeah.
Because I'm one of those people that lays down and all of a sudden 20 ideas are going through my head.
Mhm.
She can
Oh
tell
yeah.
you. In fact, I'll text her at like 3 o'clock in
Yeah.
the morning with one idea.
Yes.
Yeah. I have anxiety disorder, so I
Yeah,
too sometimes just can't sleep. Yeah.
yeah.
Intrusive thoughts.
Yeah. And have you ever had anything like this, Meg? Out of body experience or
Not out of body experience or anything like that. I have had a few instances where like I've woken up from a dream and I was like that was weird
yeah.
and then it happened, like I've got a lot of that kind of thing and I can pinpoint exactly when I dreamed it or at certain points I've told people
Yeah.
about
Let's
things.
let's talk
So, and
about
then they've
dreams,
happened.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Boy. I don't dream at all. I joke
Oh.
that I daydream so much that when it gets to the evening, it's I use it up everything. So, but what about you? How do you have? You normally have dreams? Do you normally remember them, and are
Yeah.
they useful to you? Do you
Sometimes.
use them in literature? Do you take notes? Do you have like a dream journal or anything?
I don't so much. Sometimes I'll keep notes on them, but very often I find dreams are actually very useful to me to help me focus in on where my mind is really going and what it actually is like working around in my subconscious that I need to focus in on and start facing and dealing with. It's very often a way of telling me, how things are. And my dreams tend to be very vivid. They've always been in color too.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm a lucid dreamer for
Um,
sure.
Oh yeah,
I in high school I learned my algebra 2 and my dance routines as I slept at night because I was so busy. That was the only time, and so I would wake up and I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, I get it now," and I would because all night long that's what I was doing, and I couldn't shut it off. It has been a skill for me
but
to learn how to quit the
can
lucid
you
dreaming.
can you still rest while you do that?
No, no, it is not
Ah,
restful.
okay.
So I have had to learn to teach myself it's a movie. Just let the movie happen. Sit down, let the movie happen. And I have to that's what I have to tell myself in order to quit lucid dreaming sometimes. But I have very vivid dreams, always in color. I have tasted food in my sleep. Right, like I'm
Nice.
like, yes,
Yeah.
diet cheat day, right? Like I get so excited. So yeah, hearing noises, all sorts of things. And if I have a dream that I feel like was um, interesting enough, because I can almost always remember my dreams, at least for a little while after I'm awake. But if I feel like I have a dream that was interesting enough or unique enough or whatever, I will sometimes write it down. I have uh, a whole list of story ideas basically from that. And so yeah, I use that as a huge source of inspiration. And is it probably my subconscious? Yeah, probably. But they make great starting points when I'm hitting a writer's block and I
Oh
need some
yeah,
sort of inspiration. So I just go to that file and I dig through stuff. Yeah.
yeah. I do that too, but with daydreaming. Like I daydream stuff, I take notes, and then I check it later. Do you do both of you use this kind of notebook? Because I always ask this because maybe someone out there is creating too and doesn't have the habits, take notes of their ideas. Is that something that is important to you? Because I know creators that also just do when the idea comes, they do it, but they don't, take notes of everything. I if I wake up in the middle of the night with idea and I to sleep better, my phone is in another room. I get up
Mhm.
and go to another room to note that on my notes app. Uh, how do you do with that? Like, do you constantly taking notes? We hear sort of writers that always carry a notebook with them. Do you do this too, or?
I usually have one around somewhere in the vicinity, and I do take notes because very often what'll come to me is like bits of dialogue or
Mhm.
concept. And if I don't write it down, it'll be gone. So I always
Mm,
write it down. And I've often used that and incorporated it later on. I mean, I may not know where it's going at the time that I write it down, but
yeah.
invariably I end up finding a place for it that it fits perfectly. So, yeah.
Um, I also keep a notebook and pens because I like to write by hand. But if I'm out and about, I have my Google Docs on my phone. And so I will open up a new doc. Um, Although I will say over the last couple years, right now, I have, Diogo, 34 unfinished novels in
Oh
my
yeah.
Google Docs. Very far, some of them. Like I've written the end and I just need to edit them and be done. But I have shiny object syndrome, right?
Yeah.
Part of my ADHD. Like I've
Oh
written
yeah.
it, now it's done, now I'm bored with it, whatever. And so I'll wait for inspiration to get like, I want to write something, what do I want to write? And then I'll go back through my list and I'll be, oh, that would be so fun to write right now. And so that's
Yeah.
kind of, always making progress. But I would say because of that and because I'm really trying to work through that, to find ways that I can work through that, is I am, instead of digging into that in ways that I previously would have just jumped into it and gotten started with something, I am making my notes and then I'm shutting the document and I am being very forceful about making myself finish these projects, which is part of why I think this Terra Arcis thing is such a win, is because it's actually like there. It's right
Yeah.
at the very end. And so that having that win, having something that's completed and dusted off, it's come more and more often here the last couple of years. as I've built that discipline and also gotten treated for my ADHD. But it is very nice to have something that is right there at the very
Yeah.
end. So yeah.
Yeah. I do also have, a bunch of unfinished stuff, and always wanting to make something new. Like I have 2 projects with covers that I already made, but I have
Mm-hmm.
to write them. I also have games that are already written, but have to edit and kind of stuff. And for a while, I even had a hard time remember all the stuff that I have going on. So I
Mm-hmm.
have to have this list of projects that are
Yes.
ongoing,
Yes.
or I will because
Yes.
I forget that sometimes I open the document. Oh, I was writing this.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
It's
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah, it is.
Yep.
But you have to relearn stuff too. Like I have this game. That was a really cool game that I wrote in Portuguese to release in Brazil because also some people in Brazil doesn't like me because I write in English and don't release games
Sure.
in Portuguese. So
Yeah.
I made a game to release only in Portuguese first and then in English, but it
That's
wasn't
good.
released too. But it wasn't
Oh.
released, so that's
Yeah.
no good at all. But
But
we are going to release it and release it in English too. But now I have to write because I wrote it in the beginning of the pandemic. So my anxiety in 2020 was at the highest level, and I wrote 5 games
uh-huh.
during
Wow.
2020. Yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
this one's a big one. It's like a 300 pages game. It's a big one.
Wow, yeah.
But since it was the beginning of the pandemic, I wasn't into solo gaming yet. And now
Uh-huh.
I have to write a solo version for it.
Yes.
So it's something that I have to do. Yeah. But
I
yeah.
have I have what I call my closet novel. That's the story that I started when I was in high school. And
Oh, yeah.
it has gone through so many changes, and as it's been like 15 years now, and as I have changed as a person, my character, the tone of the story, my voice,
Oh,
all of
yeah.
those things have changed, and it doesn't match, and then I have to go back
Yeah.
and I do a huge edit, and then I get tired of it, so I put it away and I come back a couple years later, like that whole thing.
Do you
Uh,
think you'll ever write it, or is it just more like a novel therapy kind of thing
I
that you
think it's
do?
probably going to be novel therapy. I think someday somebody's going to find it and it's going to be like 3,000 pages and they're going to be like, what is this? um, but I think it's fun for me as a writing exercise to go back into that world where I'm so
Oh,
familiar
for
with the
sure.
people and the places and all of that kind of
And you
stuff.
remember things like, oh, I was doing this
Mhm.
while writing, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of retrospective in a way.
Hmm. Yeah.
I
No,
found,
talking. Go ahead, Terry. Sorry.
I found when something catches me, even if it's new, I grab it and I run with it as long as I can, and then I tend to go back to whatever I was working on, and then it catches me again, and I go back to the second one. So I feel like for me, it's like I have to grab the inspiration for whatever it is at the time it hits me.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. For a while, I was doing this too, like working on three personal projects at the same time. But
Hmm.
it takes so long to finish because you're hopping from one to another. But
Hmm.
when we're about to finish, like we finished the 3 almost at the same time. So now I have 3 things to publish. So it's good, but it's also bad. But it took so long. Maybe if I had done one and then the other and then the other, would be a more regular stream of releases instead of
Our
releasing
bank
a bunch of
account's
stuff
like that,
every. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. More even.
Would be better, yeah. But now I'm more like, yeah, I do what I can. I was more worried about this having a more regular stream of releases, but now I'm like, yeah, I'll do what I can, what I can when I can, you know.
So I'll ask you. One of the things with my creative friends, I have friends in a bunch of different creative industries, and one of the things that I get from them that I've noticed in myself is my creativity goes in cycles. So for me, it's a 6 week
Yes.
cycle. So for 6 weeks, I want to create all the time, constantly. I always want to be doing either, I do a lot of artwork of various kinds, or I write, or I listen to a ton of music, and I'm just like input, 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 or sorry, output, output, output. And then for the next 6 weeks, it's input, input, input. And so I just consume massive amounts of everything, right? So when I
Mm.
go to my museums, it's when I spend my time in nature and I'm listening to podcasts and I'm watching TV shows and I'm reading books and like all the input. And then I have another 6 weeks of creativity. And for me, it's a pattern like that. It kind of swings.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know if you guys had noticed a pattern like that.
Well, for me in particular, I don't know. I I don't know if I rigid with myself, but I have this idea that I have to do something every day,
Mhm.
even if it's a paragraph. I have to
Mhm.
do it, you know. And I don't know. I heard this method from Jerry Seinfeld. And he
Mhm.
has like this wall calendar of the whole year in a poster, and every day he works on something. He crosses a day.
Mhm.
So the goal is to make the bigger, worm that you can like marking every day. So the bigger sequence you get, it's like a game.
Mhm.
So that's what I try to do. Like I try to work, even if it's just a little bit, at least something like every day. And but yeah, there are periods that I can sit down and write 2,000, 5,000 words a day and being very productive. But
Mhm.
there is times that I'm more reading and then watching stuff, like watching comedy.
Mhm.
I'm counting the days for a new comedy special on Netflix that's coming on February 13th. But I love watching this stuff, but I always try to make something like to force me.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
There's because artists tell like Neil Gaiman say that sometimes you have to put out 500 crappy words for you to write 10 good ones.
Mhm.
So it's just I'm trying to build a creative habit,
Mhm.
even if it's good or bad. Like consistency is more important than intensity for me. So if I write
Mhm.
a little bit every day, by the end of the year I'll have something. So
Yep.
yeah.
I would have to say for me that I think that I go through times where actually I'm doing input, where I'm actually researching for what I'm getting ready to be working on. Because I do like to do a lot of background on things. And then I end up, then it just like pops out, but I'll go through, but I'll find times where I'm like stopping and I'm editing a novella right now. And I'm finding that I'm doing a lot of reading of stuff that's going to go into that to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that I can weave it all in. And so I think that and during that time I haven't been doing a lot of writing. I've actually been, it seems like, focused on putting this information into my brain that is somehow going to come out and make this, I feel like, a better novella than it would have been otherwise.
Yeah. I think for me it's a way of, because the more I stay not writing, to get
Mhm.
back to writing is harder.
Mhm.
So even if I just write just a little bit, I try to write every day because I know, because
Right.
there were periods I couldn't write anything, and to get back to writing was so hard, like
Mhm.
so hard.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, even if it's crap, I'm gonna write it something
Mhm.
just to keep my fingers working.
Mhm.
Like I exercise, because if you stay too much without exercise, when you go back, like your muscles are sore and like it's painful. So I force myself to write something, just
It's
to
part of
not get
building that,
rusty. Yeah,
yeah, that pattern, right?
Right.
Yeah,
yeah,
that tradition of how you sit down and get there every day. Yeah, I think that's good.
yeah,
I mean, I would say honestly, that is the ideal, that you write every day. And
Mhm.
I,
yeah.
I've tried times where I've tried to do that, but then I find that I seem to like need to stop
Oh
whenever I'm
yeah,
putting in information into my head for something that I'm working on. And very often then
for
I'll be
sure.
doing like bits of it will come, but I just feel like I need this background information to be able to
Yeah.
actually
Of course.
make
And
my
we have other jobs too, so
yeah.
it
Yeah.
should be lighter for
That's
us. Like we're not just writers and artists. We have day jobs and so it's harder, but yeah. It's something that I try to aspire, but sometimes I fail too. Sometimes I can't write and
yeah.
like I'm traveling to conventions, I'm worried, oh, I won't be able to write and this kind of stuff. But getting back into the weird experiences, I also like to ask if you have you ever had any experience with altered states of awareness, either through deep meditation or maybe hypnosis or even psychedelics or anything like this? And if you did, how was the experience and how did it impact you in any way and changing you or give you a new understanding in some way?
I haven't done anything like that. I think the closest I got was 8th grade when we were spray painting our rockets for school, and we were in an enclosed room, and we all started thinking everything was hilarious. I think that's probably the closest that I've ever gotten, and we were really hungry for some reason too. I
Wow.
think that's probably the closest that I've gotten to something like that.
Well, like I said, I had done a lot of meditation. I learned a lot about that kind of thing from when I was really young, actually. So I do think it
Yeah, I
influenced.
learned about this after a mode. Like I
Yeah,
took mushrooms for the first time during the pandemic. You know.
I have read a
Yeah.
lot of experiences about that for some of my writing, but I
yeah,
personally haven't. Yeah.
yeah. I haven't done the mushrooms thing, but I had tried, meditation. I've done meditation where, you go in and a new perspective. I think it
Yeah, it is.
helps give you a new perspective of yourself. Sometimes it gives you a new perspective of other people. Um, but I think of it more as like a spiritual experience than anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And talking about spirituality, I know both of you talked about being raised in kind of a Catholic kind of way,
Mhm.
and are you still Catholic, or do you have any religion or spirituality or any form of philosophy that maybe helps guide you through everyday life, through the hard times?
Well, I think of myself more as a spiritual person than a traditionally religious person because the truth is, I'm really lazy about going to church, which is just the honest truth. I don't think I've been there since for probably 3 years. Um, and honestly, too, I spent, you know, all week long with, 150 people who want my attention. And come the
Yeah,
weekend, I just am tired and very
yeah.
often just want to be alone. So I don't think God's trapped in a building. Um, my parents were
But do
very,
you believe in God?
yes, my parents
Mm.
were very, since one was a Baptist, one was Catholic, they ended up raising me where they wanted their kids to just make up their own mind. And there did come a time whenever I became Catholic and my own kids went to Catholic school. But I think it's actually because of that, I'm really open to just about, I don't think there's just one way. I think everybody can, has their own path they need to go on. And I don't think that necessarily my path is what everybody else needs to go down. Yeah. I'm not sure I have all the answers. I just have a whole lot of
Yeah.
questions.
But what is God for you, and how does this affect your life, your daily life in any way?
I would say so. I think I tend to think of it more as a higher power that you pull from. And I think more of it as not so much a typical religion, but as a guideline of what you feel your moral values are and how you choose to treat other people. But I think it's all, I don't think necessarily, like I said, my values are for everybody and my belief systems are for everybody. I think everybody has to come to their own conclusions. And so I don't hold it where I think everybody should believe like I believe. I feel like
Yeah.
for me, need to believe there's something that I can, count on whenever I get desperate. And
Yeah.
that would really be what it would come to. I feel like there's got to be something I can turn to when I get desperate.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that I
And
think everybody else needs
And
that.
is there something that you turn to when tough times? Do you have any kind of prayer or anything that you remember that helps you through tough times? I ask that because even though I am an atheist, you
Mhm.
know I study a lot of stoicism because of anxiety, it helped
Right.
me a lot. So there's all these teachings that I talk a lot about here in the podcast.
Right.
The this too shall pass.
Right.
And things like this. Do you have any of these teachings or spirituality, anything that you use? You could give us an example that affects you, that helps you in your daily life. For me, it would be those sayings, remembering when I'm anxious, those things outside of my control. That doesn't matter
Right.
how much
Right.
I
Right.
overthink about them. If I
Right.
can change them now, it doesn't help me to think about this. Do you have
Right. Right.
any of these teachings that you use in your daily life that you could share with us?
One thing the meditation thing has been one of the most valuable things I ever learned to do, because I feel like it may not be that I actually get in touch with God. I may just be getting in touch with my own subconscious, and I'm aware of that. But I think it has sometimes helps me feel like I have guidance. So I don't necessarily like give hard and fast labels to things as much as I do. I'm looking for a particular feeling or feeling like I can get insight to a
Hmm.
situation that's going on. Um, that would be about what I would say. It's because it's felt going down into your own subconscious. I feel like can help you guide you to what you're really wanting to do and what you're really wanting to know and what direction you're really wanting to head to. I trust an awful lot in intuition also because I've learned over the years if I don't follow my own intuition, it always goes bad for me. So, and that I think is also your own subconscious telling you what's the right thing and wrong thing to do. Like I said, I'm not necessarily hard and fast on labels, and I definitely don't think everybody's labels apply. Some people are really comfortable with one kind of situation, some people are
Yeah.
comfortable with another. I would never impose my own labels even onto my own children. In fact, I mean, when they came out of Catholic school, they both came out agnostics. And I wasn't upset about it at all because I said, everybody goes through a period of time of questioning. And I think
Yeah.
that that's not an unnatural thing. I think that's very often a sign of intelligence that people question. I certainly did myself. So I don't, that's kind of where I feel like the meditation thing has helped me find a lot of peace and feel like I could find directions to where I was going. I think it also helps me with the idea that odd experiences are not necessarily all that unusual and be more open to it, because who knows what's right and wrong? Who knows what's real? I'm not saying that I know. I'm just saying I have questions and I'd certainly like some answers, but, I don't know if
Yeah, I mean,
everybody has them. Yeah.
everybody experiences reality, whatever it
Right,
is,
right,
different. So
right,
from the start, everybody has a different reality.
right.
So even
Mhm.
I would definitely
like,
say that's true because, I mean, we come in this world that our experience is the only one. I tell this to my very own students. I tell them, look at everybody is going to view things from their own personal experiences. That's how they're going to feel about any situation
yeah.
is based on what their experiences have been. And that's
And
why
it's real for them, right? Even if
exactly,
Mhm.
reality isn't
exactly,
like, but it's real for them. Even if it's not real
yeah.
for you, it's
So I
for
tell
them.
them, don't pass judgment on somebody else's belief system because they haven't had the same experiences you have, and you haven't had the same experiences,
Hmm.
that they've had. So you have to realize that somebody may not think the same thing as you about any situation. It's because that their experiences have been different than yours.
Yeah, for sure.
I didn't mean to
And
get
what about
serious here.
no? Yeah,
I'm
and
happy to let you talk. Um, I was raised Christian. I really longed for that. I really wanted a deep, close relationship with God, and I felt like it just didn't happen for me. A lot of seeking, a lot of reading and exploring, and all of those things. And when COVID happened, I had so many questions that the elders in the church of various churches and various denominations, nobody would get back with me. Nobody wanted to deal with my questions. Nobody, whatever. And I finally decided I kind of stepped away from that for a little bit. And it really changed my perspective a lot. I continue to go to services. We still have our kids in the church. My husband still is a regular churchgoer and believer. But that's just not something that I don't know. I think I've kind of stepped out of that a little bit. So there are still things that I like that I think are very healthy about the Christian religion, right? There are phrases, whatever, like whatever is good or holy or just or, fruitful. I don't know the whole verse. All of these really positive, beautiful things, like those are the things we should focus on. Yeah, absolutely. We should love your neighbor as yourself. Yes, we should be taking care of the people around us. We should not be hating on them. We should not
Yeah.
be doing bad things for them. We should be taking care of them. There's some really beautiful ideas in there that I want my kids to have and that I think are wonderful to grow up with. I think right now, probably the phrase that I own the most is just that you never know what that person is going through.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
I think that's probably the phrase that I go through the most in my own personal life is you just don't know what that person's going through. And I just don't feel like it's my business to make their lives worse. Right. Just leave them alone. If like it doesn't take that much effort, at least for me, it doesn't to curb my tongue and to just like, okay, I guess I just don't need to say that thing. Right. We learn that when we're very young, if you don't have anything good to say, just don't say it. So I just don't feel, I don't
think
know.
to help
I guess,
us calm down too, because some, you're driving and someone, just crosses you and do something terrible, and your first instinct is to get off and, hey, you, stop fun.
Right.
But that's right. Maybe they're doing because a loved one is, in the hospital and something happened. They are rushing. We don't know. That's what you said. Like, we don't know what those people are going to. Maybe it's not that. Maybe they just are really late for the job and their bosses is just battering them on the phone and they didn't want to do this, but it's,
and everybody gets an off day too, right? Like I want grace when I'm just having a bad day and maybe that's all that's going on with them, but okay, fine. Like you can have a bad day today and it's just grace, That said,
because we do have bad days too, right? We make mistakes. We're all bad in a way.
Yeah. That said, though, like with my son, so talking about like anxiety and depression, those kind of things, he has a tendency also to like dwell within, right? Oh, it's all me. These things only happen to me, and just dwell on that kind of stuff. And for him, I've explained it out of Harry Potter. And that is, when the Dementors came and they were trying to suck Harry's soul out of his body, he had to think about the happy thoughts instead. He had to force out the negative with the positive to create his Patronus. So I mean, it's not like a religious text. I'm certainly not saying that Harry Potter is something you should worship, but it's a very good, I think it's a good explanation.
There is teachings
that.
in there for sure.
Yeah. So
unfortunately, my kid doesn't read, but that would be a very good, lesson.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows what to read, but it's. I'm trying to get him to read. I love books, but he doesn't want to read.
He doesn't read. No. Here's the thing. He doesn't want to read what you want him to read.
I buy anything he wants.
I know. I said that too.
Pokemon
it took my
comics.
son a long time.
I bought Minecraft books. I bought anything he wants to read. I buy it, but he doesn't read.
Do you make him play role-playing video games?
I try to, but he
just skips it.
He skips it, and he plays Minecraft and now those Lego games, and he doesn't. He plays. He doesn't read, and I hate YouTube. It's
sure.
I don't know. Yeah.
we had to ban YouTube in our house for a while, and still with all the ads and stuff, I probably would again. But we did for a long time.
Yeah, we pay YouTube. At least we don't have the ads. We pay for YouTube good. Because at least we don't have the ads. Because it's hard. Now getting more in the final questions, which are more whimsical, more for fun, to get to know maybe your personality and stuff you like. And if you could choose any superpower, from the comics, from fiction, or anything, what would you choose to have, and what would be the first thing you would do with it?
Hmm.
Who wants to start?
When I was a teenager, I would have said to be invisible. Now
Yeah.
I'm not sure what I would want. Um,
See, I've always wanted to fly, but I get so motion sick that I think that would be bad for me. I just
yeah,
think that I would get, yeah, very sick very quickly. But I always thought that would be really fun to be able to fly and control it, to not feel like I was falling, but to have the control to handle that and to be able to move quickly and travel. Uh,
Yeah.
I thought that
Where
would be
would be the
nice.
first thing you would fly to? Where?
Big
Or just for the
open natural
sensation to fly?
spaces.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
Probably both. Like, I think there's times in life where I just feel like, work is crushing and responsibilities and family relationships. And like, there's just so much going on that you have to try to keep track of. And it can just be overwhelming. And it would be nice just to be able to like flee for a few minutes and then
Yes.
come back, not forever. You're not trying to like leave your life, but,
right.
just for a little break every once in a while, I
Yeah.
think would be really nice. So,
That's like the invisibility too, right, Terry? Uh,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, when I ask this, like the most popular ones are fly and
hmm
invisibility, and
yeah,
those were things that I wanted to as a kid. Uh, I don't know. We feel inadequate to want to be invisible, or we want to be part of stuff, but we want to draw attention. So
right.
invisibility has always been very attractive to me too.
hmm
Uh,
I always wanted to
but I
know,
don't know. Yeah, but I don't
I
know.
wanted to know things I wasn't allowed to know.
Sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
Being
yes,
invisible would be the way to do it. That would be,
yeah,
that was what I really wanted. But I don't know if that's something I need as much now.
yeah.
I
Yeah,
have a
And I don't know. Now I also feel like maybe it's not good for me wanting to be invisible, right? To
yeah.
mhm.
disappear. So yeah,
I have a
it,
character in one of my many, many novels who talks to plants. She's a plant psychic. And the more that I spend time outside, the more I'm like, oh, I wonder what this tree has seen, right? Like I just, I ask myself stuff like
yeah,
that. And
Yeah,
they're little personalities, right? Like
right,
what's the showboaty flower and how's the grass feel when it gets mowed? Like those kind of things I think would be really
yeah.
fun too. So I
yeah.
like those kind of things.
I'd like to be able to
Nice.
hear animals' thoughts. That would be something I would enjoy. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I will admit, when I was little and, we would throw a coin in the fountain and make a wish, right? I always
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be like a witch, like Samantha on, oh
Oh
gosh, what
yeah.
was, yes,
Bewitched.
and I could just like crinkle my nose and then like my room would be clean on its
Yeah.
own without having to like tidy up. That was like as a child, that was my
That was a good
favorite
one. Yeah.
wish. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And if you could choose any weird or fantastic or sci-fi thing from any stories, media, anything, and make it real in our world, and it can be either a faction, a place, or a force, an
Oh.
entity, anything like this, and
Hmm.
make it real in our world. What would you choose to make it real, and why?
So many worlds that I now like. You open that question, there's so many things that I want to pull
Yeah.
in now. I don't know if I can
Yeah.
pick.
Oh,
um
This is another question that every time I say maybe like something like the Force, and everybody, oh yeah, the Force from Star Wars, I would love that. So I avoid giving suggestions now because of
uh-huh,
this.
sure.
I think um, there was a period of time whenever I would have said to be on Star Trek: The Next Generation. I would have loved that.
Oh,
But
Yeah,
I think now I'd probably want to be at Hogwarts.
Hogwarts is pretty great.
yeah.
Yeah.
um I would love to step into Name of the Wind, right? Like I love that book. I wish the series would be done. I've given up hope, uh but I love that whole world. I love the idea of a school where you actually learn the magic. But I particularly like in Name of the Wind that it is constructed through runes,
Yeah.
and that there's really hard specific rules to it. So it's not, you can't just do whatever you want with the flick of your wand, but there's like
Yeah.
really good construction to it. I think that's
Yeah.
really great.
That
I
was the
would.
one part
Nice.
about Hogwarts I never understood.
Mhm.
Why, if you are a magic and wizard, why do you need a wand?
Oh gosh, Terry, can you imagine being a teacher at a school where kids can literally cause whatever trouble they want
Oh my
to? Like,
God.
as
Yeah.
an adult, I totally connect with Filch so much
Yes.
because
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, maybe the one is to focus the power,
the
right?
energy.
Because
Hmm.
otherwise it's too unfocused, and only really powerful people can do without wands because they can focus.
Yeah.
They have really strong will. Maybe it's never explained, right? But
Yeah.
it's a
Oh,
theory. I don't know. Yeah.
yeah.
And the final question is, do you remember the last time you felt really happy and just grateful for being here and being alive? And if you do, can you just share with us when was it and how it was for you?
I actually feel that way quite a lot. Um, a lot of it's just perspective. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes it's just walking out in your backyard and seeing the sunrise and saying, I'm glad for this day.
Oh yeah,
Um,
but do you remember the last time you stopped to do that?
I do it. I actually, up until just this last week when I've been sick with a sinus infection, I would do it every day. Every
Hmm.
morning I'd get the dogs to go outside. And while they were outside doing the dog stuff, I would, look at the sunrise coming up and, just be glad for the day and think of the things because I believe in the law of attraction. I believe that if you think positive things will come to you. You can't always do this as much as you try. There's times whenever things just suck.
Yeah.
But I really try hard to stay in a positive place and at least at some point in time during the day, be grateful for the things that I feel are good in my life. Sometimes I leave work, and believe me, sometimes my job is not all that easy, and sometimes it's really great.
Oh,
So, yeah, I mean,
as a teacher, yeah, we know.
sometimes I'm thinking, oh, thank you, Jesus, it's 4:05, and
Yeah,
um, you're
So you can
walking.
go home from work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You're walking.
TGI Friday. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
you're walking to your car and you can't get out of there fast enough. But other times I stop and say, I'm grateful for this job. I'm grateful for the Texas sky. I'm grateful for, the drive home. I'm grateful that Bluebell Mike's ice cream. You just kind of stop and think about things,
Yeah.
So I think you just sometimes have to look for the little things and to
And
be happy.
do you have a practice of doing this? And if you do, how did you learn to stop and do that? Because it's not something you
Yeah,
grew up learning, right? It's not, you
no,
didn't grow.
no,
Yeah.
no. Nobody in my family taught me that. Trust me.
Yeah.
Um, I I was reading about that I was reading about the law of attraction, and I was reading also about the thought of gratitude. That you're grateful for what you have. And I went through some rough times. Megan knows about these, and when I was going through the rough times, it helped me an awful lot to start looking around at what was good and
Hmm.
focus in on what was actually going positive. And by staying where I would look at the things that were positive, it helped make what was rough bearable because you're looking at going, well, yeah, this
For
sucks right
sure.
now, but you can look at, I've got great coworkers and I've got, look at this great drive home and, look at this house I've got in this backyard that I look out onto and, look at my dogs and I mean,
Yeah.
oh, I have a new book coming from Amazon. I mean, just things like that would make me really happy. So I learned to look at the little things that the little things, if you look at enough good things, little things, you can stay in a fairly positive point of view.
Yeah.
I like to compare myself to a medieval fisherwoman. So
How is
you know
that?
how some people keep up
Oh,
with
yeah.
the Joneses and they have to like have
Yeah.
the newest, greatest thing. I'm like, it could be worse. Okay. My husband travels a week every month. He's gone a week every month. He just left today for a couple of weeks. And so he'll be gone for 2 weeks. And I'm like, yeah, but if I were a medieval fisherwoman, he could be dead and I wouldn't know about it for 6 months. And I'd have 12 brats because birth control wasn't a thing and I couldn't rear them. And like, I would have no money and it would be terrible. Like, so I compare
And people
myself to
say
that woman.
comparison, and people say comparison is the thief of joy, but no, right? You just have to
Yeah.
compare to some
To the right thing. Yeah.
really terrible, yeah.
Well, this is kind of an opposite way of looking
Yeah.
at the world here, but it works for
Again,
both of us.
I think I started this and said, I am weird. I have a lot of weird things. This is one of those things. Yeah, but I do. I've had people be like, oh, that must have been your past life. I'm like, maybe, because, oh my goodness, I can just see it in my head so clearly. Yeah, for me, my day where I felt content and joy and just overwhelming happiness and warmth. Last week, I got a great opportunity. I had a day where I was already crazy busy, right? I was crazy busy. I've got a full-time job. We're launching this book. I've got a class online that I have to take for professional development. So that's, 6 to 8 hours every week that I'm doing that in my own private time. I've got some other stuff that I'm doing as far as like other income stream, that kind of thing that I'm like trying to build up that haven't happened yet. And so I just have a lot of things going on in my spare time. And on Thursday last week, I was asked, because someone was unable to do it for health reasons, if I could suddenly read these essays when I didn't have time to read them. I was like, well, that's an hour. But okay, let me read these essays and rank them for this organization because they were supposed to have them yesterday and I need to help out my coworker. So I did that. And then I had another student who needed something looked over for a scholarship application that could potentially change their life and make college affordable for them. And I had another student who said, hey, I desperately need you to write this letter so that I don't get dropped from college because when I was young and stupid, I didn't do well in my college classes. And I need that opportunity. And I think there were like 4 different situations like that.
Wow.
And I went home and I got to just hang out with my kids that evening for the first time in a long time. I got to see my husband for the first time. We're both very, very busy people, so trying to find time to connect is hard. And I just thought, at the end of my day, look at the things that I've done that have been able to pour out positivity in the world. And to be able to see that was really lovely, to look at that and say, yeah, I made a really positive impact today. And I just felt really at peace with everything.
Yeah. It's great. And I heard today, listening to a podcast, that love is an act of service, right? So we're just giving love out there. So that's very, very nice, Megan. And thanks for sharing this.
Yeah.
And that's all the questions I have. So thank you very much, Meg and Terry, for coming here. And do you have any last messages to give to the wonderful weirdos out there that are listening to us?
Check out our Kickstarter, Terra Arcis. And we would definitely, if you do purchase that, we definitely want to hear the stories that you wrote about that. So let us know, connect with us. Tell us what your story ended up as.
That's what we're really looking forward to, is hearing everybody else's stories.
Yes.
Yeah. Check out the show notes. The links are there. And go support Terra Arcis, their Kickstarter. And can you take us out saying the catchphrase of the show? Keep it weird, everybody.
Keep it weird, everybody.
Keep it weird. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Weird Games and Weirder People. If you'd like to keep up with the show, please subscribe to be notified when we release new episodes. If you'd like to support us, please leave a review or head on to code-fi.com/WGNWP. See you next time, and remember, weird is the new wonderful.